I know we have students in the courtroom. I want to remind you, you can't film or audio record anything that's going on in the courtroom. Otherwise, we'll have to take your phone. Ms. Blanchard, have a seat, please. I think your water's still there, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It's not a fire, so don't worry. You get it? Don't be scared. Be scared. You don't want to hold the microphone. This one's pretty sensitive.
I don't like holding it.
You like holding it?
Yeah.
Okay. That's and there's tissues for you too. You don't have to send this one to you. All rise. Please have a seat. Thank you. Ms. Blanchard, I want to remind you that you're still under oath. Mr. Perry?
Thank you, Judge. Gypsy, how many boyfriends did you have prior to Nick?
None.
Now, I want to start talking about June of 2015. You mentioned that you had decided to kill your mother at some point.
Yes, sir.
Was that the only plan you ever had in terms of how to get out of your situation?
Besides running away, that is the only thing.
Did you have other alternative plans other than killing your mother?
Yes.
How many plans altogether did you have?
3.
Okay. Did you have names for those plans?
Yes.
What were the names?
Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C.
And could you tell us about the other 2 possibilities other than killing your mother?
Yes. Plan A, we already had tried that, which was to meet up at the movie theater, act like we never met before, and try and start a relationship from there, with my mother's permission.
And what was the other alternative plan?
Another one was for me to get pregnant. I believed that since he would be the father, he would have to be in my life.
Now, Nick came down to Springfield again in June of 2015, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Who paid for that trip?
I did.
Why did you pay for that trip?
Again, I didn't think he had enough money.
And how did you get money to him to come down on that trip?
I stole money from my mother, and I sent it to him via the mail.
Do you have any idea exactly how much money you sent to Nick?
Over $1,000.
And in these 2 trips to Springfield, how much of his own money was used?
I do not know.
Are you aware that he spent any of his money on either of these 2 trips?
No, sir.
Do you know when he arrived on the second trip?
Yes.
And when was that?
I believe it was June 8th of 2015.
And how long did he stay this time?
Only a couple of days.
And was this when your mother was murdered?
Yes.
And when was that specifically?
June 10th, 2015.
Do you know about what time she was murdered?
Maybe about 3 a.m. in the morning.
And after her murder, what time did you leave?
Maybe 6 in the morning.
After the murder, where did you go, you and Nick?
We went back to the hotel, the Days Inn Hotel.
Now, while he was on his way down here, did you guys talk?
Yes.
How did you communicate?
Text message, Facebook.
And the state has introduced into evidence a knife, and I believe it is State's Exhibit 145. Did Nick have a knife that was used in the murder?
I supplied the knife.
Where did you get the knife?
I stole it from Walmart
And why did you steal it from Walmart?
because I didn't see a knife that was sufficient enough in our own home.
There was also some gloves that have been introduced into evidence.
Yes.
Where did Nick get the gloves?
I supplied them.
And where did you get the gloves?
They were already in our house.
How did Nick know when to do this crime, time-wise, that morning?
I told him.
Who planned this murder?
I did.
Did Nick do any of the planning in this murder?
He may have had one or two.
Do you know what plans he provided?
He decided what the weapon would be.
Had you discussed alternative methods of killing your mother?
Yes.
What other alternatives had you considered?
Poison, arson, a gun.
Why did you not consider poison?
It was too hard to find an odorless, tasteless poison.
Why didn't you kill your mother?
I didn't believe I could do it.
Could you explain what you mean by that?
I don't like blood. I don't like the sight of blood. Frankly, I'm too squeamish, so I just honestly didn't believe I could do it on my own.
After the murder, how long did you and Nick remain in Missouri?
Maybe 2 days.
And where were you planning on going?
Back to his mom's house in Wisconsin.
Did you encounter any problems that caused you to be delayed from leaving Springfield?
Yes, sir.
What problems?
His return bus ticket, there was no room for an extra passenger on that bus, so we had to change bus tickets. So that delayed us about a day.
And where did you go that extra day?
We went back to the motel,
What motel?
Days Inn.
Why did you go to that motel?
That was the motel that he was staying at.
Who paid for that motel room?
I did.
Who went in to reserve the room?
Nick did.
Why did Nick go in and make the reservation if you were paying for it?
I didn't want to be seen.
Why did you not want to be seen?
I didn't want to be recognized.
Did you go anyplace else other than Days Inn while you remained at Springfield after your mother's death?
Yes.
Where?
The Waffle House right across the street. The post office. Walmart. And of course the Greyhound bus station.
Okay, let's take them one at a time. Why did you go in the Waffle House? That may seem like a silly question. Why did you go in the Waffle House?
Because we were hungry.
Okay, when did you go to the Waffle House?
I think it was the morning of the 12th.
Why did you go to the post office?
To mail the knife back to his mother's house.
And who decided to mail the knife through the mail?
I did.
Why did you decide to mail it through the mail?
Because he wanted me to take it in my backpack, and I never had ridden on a bus before, and I didn't think that there were any way that I could get it through without being undetected. So I figured mail it people mail knives all the time. They buy knives offline. Nobody will know the difference.
The return address on the package, what return address was it?
Mine.
And then it was mailed to his house in Wisconsin?
Yes, sir.
Why'd you go to Walmart?
We needed a few extra things.
Did you go in Walmart?
No, sir.
Why not?
I waited outside with the luggage.
Did you go in the post office?
Yes.
Do you know exactly when you arrived in Wisconsin?
I believe it was the night of the 13th.
And did he have family that he lived with?
Yes.
Do you know who the family was?
His mother, his stepfather, and his little brother.
And how long were you at the house until law enforcement came?
2 days.
What were your plans going forward? What did you plan on doing?
Just staying with him and living forever there.
Give any thought to possibly the police locating you? Did that ever occur to you?
No, sir.
What did you think would happen to you?
Thought maybe that if people knew that I was gone, they would just think I was missing. And missing people go, unfound all the time. So I just thought I'd remain a missing person.
Now, there was a Facebook post made about this case. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, sir.
Do you know where that Facebook post was made, on whose account?
Yes, sir.
Whose account?
My mother's.
What did the Facebook post say? If you can recall exactly, or close to it.
That bitch is dead.
Was there a comment in the post as well about the daughter?
Yes, sir.
What was that comment?
I don't remember exactly how it was worded. It's something to the fact of, I raped her sweet, innocent daughter. Her laugh was so fucking loud.
Who made that post?
I did.
Did you make that post pretending to be somebody else?
Yes.
And who were you pretending to be?
Nick.
Why would you make that post claiming to be Nick?
I wanted her to be found. I wanted the cops to find her body.
Now, when you and Nick left her house, did you take any money with you?
Yes.
How much?
A little over $4,000.
And where did you get that money?
I stole it from my mother's safe.
While you were gone, how much of that money did you spend?
A couple of $100.
Just one moment, Judge.
Yes, sir.
Gypsy, just a couple more questions. Did your mother own a car?
Yes, sir.
What kind of car?
I can't remember what it's called now. It's a little Nissan Cube, I think.
Okay. Why did you take the Nissan Cube?
I don't know how to drive.
Do you have a driver's license?
No, sir.
Did Nick have a driver's license?
Yes, I think so.
That's all the questions I have, Mr. Judge.
Thank you. Does the state have questions?
Yes, may I move the TV? I'm just going to show Ms. Blanchard a few exhibits.
Sure. Make sure you can see it, okay, Ms. Blanchard? Can you all see it?
Ms. Blanchard, you and I have talked before, right?
Yes, sir.
I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions, okay?
Yes, sir.
You were asked a little bit about, during your relationship, these alter egos that the defendant and you came up with. You remember that?
Yes, sir.
It was the defendant who first introduced you to that idea of alter egos.
Yes, sir.
And he actually first told you about his alter ego, Victor. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
And Victor was a vampire that was 500 years old.
Yes, sir.
And you decided to come up with your alter egos just to kind of please him.
Yes, sir.
And also, as part of this fantasy, you also started to kind of consider yourselves as master and slave, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the defendant was the master,
Yes, sir.
and you were the slave.
Yes, sir.
And at one point, he had sent you basically like a bill of sale, kind of ownership papers. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
And those papers would basically mean that the defendant owned you.
Yes, sir.
And you also were asked a little bit about the videos that you and the defendant sent back and forth. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
And on a lot of those videos that you would send, the defendant would actually send you a script beforehand, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that script would instruct you on what to do in the videos.
Yes, sir.
And they weren't always things you wanted to do, correct?
That is correct.
But you did them anyways,
Yes, sir.
because the defendant told you to.
Yes, sir.
Then at some point also, the defendant at least communicated to you about rape fantasy. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
And you weren't crazy about that idea, correct?
No, sir.
But I believe that as you described it before, you kind of just let him talk about it, correct?
Yes, sir.
To indulge him.
Yes, sir.
The defendant had told you that he had Asperger's, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the only real symptom or maybe personality trait that you noticed that you thought was a result of that was that he insisted that you always capitalize his name.
Yes, sir.
And he would get mad at you if you would talk to him and not capitalize his name, correct?
That is correct.
Prior to, you and the defendant first discussed the killing of your mom, I believe you said about a year prior, correct?
Yes, sir.
And prior to that, you had thought about it before, correct? Like just as a thought.
Yes, sir.
But it was once you were with the defendant that it really became a constant thought, correct?
That is correct.
And that was because the defendant had introduced you to some dark fantasies, correct?
That is correct.
And you felt by being with the defendant and these dark fantasies, that kind of helped bring that out of you.
Yes, sir.
And actually, at one point, the defendant told you he was an assassin in another life.
Yes, sir.
And that as an assassin, he could protect you or take care of you, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you had come up with the alternatives. I believe it was 3 plans, right? Plan A, B, and C, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the decision to murder your mom was always the last resort, correct?
Yes, sir.
But the murder was referred to as Plan B, right?
Yes, sir.
So A, B, and C kind of are a little out of order. Is that there?
That is correct.
Okay, so A is try to get mom to like defendant, correct?
That is correct.
And then C would be try to get you pregnant.
Yes, sir.
And you discussed those alternative plans with the defendant, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you discussed the fact that murdering your mom would be a last resort. You discussed that fact with the defendant.
Yes, sir.
Because you both knew that was a serious thing.
Yes, sir.
And the defendant knew that as well.
Yes.
At least he communicated that to you.
Yes.
And when it came to the movie theater, I think we heard that didn't go very well, right?
That is correct.
And basically, your mom thought a 26-year-old guy at a Disney movie by himself maybe a little creepy.
Yes.
Okay. So that plan didn't go well.
No.
And then when it came to the pregnancy, which I guess would be plan C,
Yes.
at some point the defendant didn't really want to do that plan anymore, correct?
He wanted to do it, but his mother wouldn't allow it.
So he basically told you, communicated to you, I can't do plan C.
Correct.
But a couple weeks before the murder, you kind of still were suggesting to him, hey, could we hold off and try getting pregnant? Do you remember that?
Yes.
But the defendant never really gave you an answer on that. Do you recall?
No, he never gave me an answer on it.
He didn't say, sure, let's try that,
No.
so we can keep killing mom as a last resort, nothing like that.
Yes.
All right. Of the plans, you mentioned that how the murder was to take place, that was all up to the defendant, correct?
That is correct.
And it was the defendant that told you he wanted to stab your mom.
Correct.
And it was the defendant that told you he wanted a knife.
Yes.
And he figured it would be easier for you to get a knife because you could steal it because you would be in the wheelchair, correct?
Correct.
And you knew that the defendant had researched knives online.
Correct.
And at first, he actually wanted you to get like a big machete type knife.
Yes.
But you didn't think that that would be a lot harder to probably wheel out of Walmart, is that right?
That is correct.
So, although he wanted the big machete, you basically saw a knife that you thought you could get out of Walmart.
Yes, sir.
And then you took a picture of that knife
Yes, sir.
and you sent that to the defendant
Yes, sir.
to make sure that he approved of that knife.
That is correct.
And he did, ultimately.
Yes.
But in addition to the knife, the defendant, since it was his idea on how to kill your mom, he also wanted tape and a taser, correct?
Yes.
And he wanted you to get those items for him.
Yes.
And at one point, you had communicated to him that you had gotten the tape, right?
Yes.
But you apologized to him that you were not able to get the taser.
Yes, sir.
And for him, the tape was so that he was going to be able to muffle your mom.
That is correct.
And the taser was to basically keep her from fighting back. Is that right?
That is correct.
So before June 10th, in preparation for the murder, fair to say the defendant wanted to take steps to muffle her,
That is correct.
and the defendant wanted to take steps to keep her from fighting back.
That is correct.
And I'll have you look over here. A little bit about your plan afterwards. You wanted to be able to go and live in Wisconsin, correct?
Yes, sir.
But you actually weren't crazy about going to Waukesha County or Big Bend where he lived, correct?
I do not remember.
Do you remember, here, I'll show you. So if you see there, you're on both. See where it's pink and it says Gypsy?
Yeah.
Looks like you kind of had an idea of wanting to go to Milwaukee. You thought sort of that bigger city might be appealing, correct?
I guess that is correct.
And it was the defendant that actually told you, no, I'd rather that we live here in Waukesha. As you can see on the left, see on his text how it's blue and it says defendant over it.
Yes, sir.
Then after he shoots down Milwaukee, you basically say, okay, we can start looking for apartments in Waukesha. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And then when it came to the money, you can see here in this conversation on May 30th that you text him that with the $5,000 I have, we will be set. And he says, good idea, correct?
Yes, sir.
And at that time, you thought $5,000 would last you guys a long time, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you say that it's $5,000 you have, and he actually responds there on the left, dear, I know, but you mean our $5,000. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
He wanted to make sure that you knew that wasn't your money, that was going to be your money together, correct?
Yes, sir.
Then you had some messages as the defendant was taking the cab from the Days Inn to your house, right?
Yes, sir.
And those texts pretty much led right up to him being at the door, correct?
Yes, sir.
And before he got to your house, he wanted to make sure that you were wearing something that he approved of. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
And if you look there to your right, you agree that, and that's a little bit earlier in the evening, so you stated around 2, 3 o'clock is when your mom died, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that'd be the morning of the 10th.
Yes, sir.
So this is a couple hours before, not about 9 o'clock on the 9th, and he says that he expects you to look like his woman should, and he suggests red fingernail polish, correct?
Yes, sir.
And do you remember you actually told him you didn't have any red fingernail polish?
Yes, sir. I remember.
And so you came up, I think, was it with pink lip gloss?
Pink.
Okay,
Yeah.
pink fingernail polish.
Mm-hmm.
And then he also, as you can see up there on the right, he wanted you to wear red lipstick, and you didn't have any of that.
That is correct.
And that's, I think, where you settled on pink lip gloss?
Yes.
Okay. And then if you look up there to the right, you can see on the right where it's circled by defendant that he says, so will you or how do you wish to present yourself to him? Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
And you don't answer him right away, and he asks you again there on the left to answer the question, right?
Yes, sir.
And then looks like from 9:25 to 10, you still haven't answered him, and he's asking you again, right?
Yes, sir.
But what he's waiting on an answer for is how you're going to be dressed when he gets there to kill your mom.
Yes, sir.
And you eventually answer him there at 10 that you'll be in a nightgown with painted pink nails and lip gloss, right?
Yes, sir.
And then he says to you, okay, but when he gets you from the bathroom, I suggest you are naked when he sees you after the deed. You see that?
Yes, sir.
And while you were in the bathroom, you could hear your mom, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you heard her scream,
Yes, sir.
and she screamed your name.
Yes, sir.
And once you were cleaning up afterwards, he wanted you to help clean up blood, right?
Yes, sir.
And he wanted you to clean naked,
Yes, sir.
because that kind of turned him on.
Yes, sir.
As for I'm jumping back just a second, okay? Going back real quick to your plans for afterwards when you were in Wisconsin. you had a pre-planned story that you were going to say in the event that you were ever caught, right?
Yes, sir.
And he came up with that story.
Yes, sir.
And so, considering the possibility of getting caught after the murder, the defendant told you of a story that you guys could come up with.
Yes, sir.
And actually, before the police arrested you in Wisconsin, you were hiding in the closet of Nick's room together, right?
That is correct.
And he confirmed with you to make sure that you have the story down.
That is correct.
You were asked on direct about the fact that you had provided the gloves, right?
Yes, sir.
And those were gloves that you already had at your house.
Yes, sir.
And if you go ahead and look over to your right, you see here, and this is about 1:30 a.m., you say to him, oh, you may not need to put the gloves on because we will sink it so it's never found. You're talking about the knife, right?
Yes, sir.
And if you look there to the right, it's the defendant that tells you he is still going to put the gloves on, correct?
Yes, sir.
Even though you suggested he may not need it.
Yes, sir.
I'm almost done. When the defendant agreed to kill your mom, at some point he told you that he also wanted to rape her.
Yes, sir.
You did not want the defendant to rape your mom, correct?
No, sir.
And in fact, in leaving the decision of how to kill her up to the defendant, you never told him to stab her 17 separate times, right?
No.
And you certainly didn't tell him to cut her neck down to the bone, right?
No.
And when he asked you about raping your mother, you actually talked him out of it, right?
Yes.
And you did so by offering the alternative that he would be able to rape you after the murder, correct?
That is correct.
I don't have any further questions there.
Thank you, Mr. Perry.
Did Nick ever rape you?
Ms. Blanchard. Do these now. Mr. Perry, let her have a drink first.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Did Nick ever rape you?
No.
And when you guys had sex after your mother's murder, was that consensual?
It started out as consensual, yes.
What do you mean it started out as consensual?
I told him to stop during sex, and he did not.
So you agreed to have sex with him consensually?
Yes.
Now, the prosecutor said that, asked you about this story, that, which was a lie, of course, about what you were going to tell law enforcement when, if you got caught, correct?
That is
And I
correct.
think you testified that Nick came up with that story.
That is correct.
Isn't it true that both of you
I'm going
came
to
up?
object to leading.
Judge, he's impeached the witness.
Are you going to reference something?
Yes.
Would you tell us the page number, please?
I'll have her.
That you're referencing?
And I also may ask clarification on when I impeached the witness. I don't recall that.
Judge, Judge, can I show her deposition?
To see if it refreshes her recollection. Is that the purpose?
Yes.
Yes. And tell her the page number then, please.
Gypsy, I'm on page 79.
You turn to page 79, please. And I don't want you to read it out loud. If you'd read it to yourself, please.
I'm going to start with line 5.
Okay.
See line 5 on page 79?
Yes, sir.
Now, first of all, let's be clear what we're talking about. We're talking about a deposition that you gave on November 1st, 2018. You recall that, do you not?
Yes, sir.
The question on line 5 is question. Did they just come into the room? You see that question?
Yes, sir.
There's a rather extended answer of your part. Would you go ahead and just read your answer in full?
Yes, sir.
And if you can't read, I apologize. You can read.
I can read, yes,
Okay.
sir. No, they had armored vehicles outside. There were patrol cars all surrounding the house. They came in with the canine unit downstairs. And I remember that because I thought it was his dog barking. But it was the canine unit. And they kept saying, "Come downstairs, Nick Godejohn, you are under arrest. Come down with your hands above your head." And we both woke up at that point. I looked at him scared, and he said to get in the closet. So we both got into his bedroom closet, where we stayed there for a little while discussing what we were going to tell the cops. And I told him, "Let me go down first. Let me leave the closet." I told the officers I'm coming downstairs. They said walk to my voice, and I walked down the stairs. They grabbed me and put me in handcuffs, and they pulled me out into the yard and started asking me questions like, "Does he have any weapons?" And I said no, and that was it.
And in this question and in your answer, you talk about this closet situation. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And who did you say in that answer had come up with the story?
We did.
And that's the truth, is it not?
Yes.
It's something you both discussed.
Yes.
Wasn't just him.
No, it was the both of us.
Now, the date that that your mother was murdered, was that the original date, or was it moved up?
It was moved up.
Who moved it up?
I did.
I'm going to object at this point, Your Honor. I believe these questions are outside the scope of the cross.
I'm going to allow it.
Why did you move it up?
He told me that the money was running out, and he didn't think that he had enough money for another night's stay at the hotel.
Now, you talked a little bit about you had to clean up after your mother's murder. You did that voluntarily, correct?
Yes.
He didn't make you.
No.
What were you doing while your mother was being killed?
I was sitting in the bathroom, on the bathroom floor with my hands covering my ears.
And how did you know when it was over?
It was a code that we settled on to use.
Did you settle on this code together?
Yes.
What was the code?
I believe it was 3 knocks and 2 scratches on the door
Why did you need a code?
to let me know when to come out of the bathroom.
Did you have any concerns about what might happen?
Yes.
What concerns did you have?
I was afraid that my mother would end up hurting him.
Now, this knife, why did you buy the knife at Walmart?
I did not buy it. I stole it.
I apologize. Why did you get the knife at Walmart? How about that?
He asked me to.
And what was your understanding was going to happen to that knife, with that knife?
He was going to use it to kill my mother.
And you knew that when you went and stole it, correct?
Yes.
Now, there's been some discussion of some of these fantasies you had. These were all fantasies that the two of you had, correct?
Yes, sir.
Collectively.
Yes, sir.
You guys did this with some regularity, correct?
Yes.
And you willingly agreed to make these videos.
Yes.
And you also yourself wrote some letters, some stories that involve sex, am I correct?
Yes.
Wrote for him.
Yes.
And this reference to this agreement that you're going to be master-slave, that was something you guys did together?
I'm going to object. This whole line of questioning has been leading, and this is the defendant's witness. The rules are very clear on that.
It is it is our witness, Judge. I would like to rephrase the question.
Thank you.
So, okay. Whose idea was it to have this master-slave thing?
It was Nick's.
And did you go along with it willingly?
Yes.
Did you have a problem with it?
I didn't particularly like it, but I went along with it.
Now, you talked a little bit about this situation at the Cinderella movie. And I think you testified on cross-examination that your mother thought it was creepy that a 26-year-old was at a Cinderella movie.
That is correct.
Okay. How old were you during that movie?
23.
That's all the question. No, Judge, actually, I'd like to make a record before we're done, but if the state has more recross, then we can do it after that.
All right.
Just a couple. That, when you were in the bathroom, you had mentioned the code that you guys had, right?
Yes, sir.
And actually, at some point, the defendant had warned you about coming into the bedroom while he was killing your mom, right?
Yes, sir.
Because he was worried that his evil side could possibly hurt you.
Yes, sir.
And the story that you all came up with, in the event that you were caught, you were asked a question and an answer from your deposition. Do you remember that?
Can you rephrase that?
Yeah, that was a terrible question. Mr. Perry had asked you to read an answer from your deposition. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
Would you do me a favor? Could you turn to page 68?
Yes, sir.
Are you there?
Yes.
You see the very, very last line where the question starts, did you?
Yes, sir.
And the question is, did you and Nick have a story? And then if you turn to the next page, that you guys had put together that if somehow you got caught, you were going to tell this one story. You see that question?
Yes, sir.
And what was your answer?
Yes, sir.
And then the question is, what was that story? You see that?
Yes, sir.
And what was your answer?
That my mother kicked me out of the house and that I called him to come pick me up because I was going to live with Nick and his mom.
And then the next question you see is, did you have a story of where you ran into each other? Did anything go that far that you recall? And what was your answer?
No, sir.
And then you see the question, who came up with this story? And what was your answer?
He did.
And also, if you would just look for a moment, going back to the text messages.
Can you see that, Miss?
Yes, sir.
And there on the left, it looks like this conversation takes place June 8th at about 1:23 p.m., right?
Yes, sir.
And you ask him, is it all good? You got the tickets, hon, right?
Yes, sir.
And then he says to you, dear, please go with the story I had told my mom and stepdad. You see that?
Yes, sir.
And then he responds again, yes, dear.
Yes, sir.
And then if you look there, you ask him, please let me know what story.
Yes, sir.
And then he says, I'll tell you in person, dear, because I'll be able to explain it better then. You see that?
Yes, sir.
And you say, okay, not saying a word on Facebook to anyone after that. But the story referenced in that is this story that you would tell if you were ever caught.
Yes, sir.
No other questions?
Thank you.
Just a couple more and then we need to make a recommendation. He told you in that text that it was the story, quote, I had told my mom, correct?
Yes, sir.
I want you to go back to page 69, where you were just reading with the prosecutor. I want to read the very next question. If you can find, I think the prosecutor ended on page 69, line 13.
Yes,
You
sir.
see the very next question starting on line 14?
Yes, sir.
I'll read the question, you can read the answer. But you guys had agreed that this was a story you were going to tell should somehow you guys get arrested. Is that correct? What was your answer?
Yes, sir.
That's all.
Thank you. Anything?
No.
May I ask Mr. Dee, excuse
I'd like to make a record before we excuse the judge, real quick.
privately?
I think it needs to be.
You can put that microphone back if you'd like, Liz.